Suki will read.
Yes, I will read.
Nearer approach. Yeah.
Okay. A nearest approach to the beginnings of the way of devotion becomes possible when this element of divine power disengages itself from these crudities and fixes on the idea of a divine ruler, creator of the world, and master of the law who governs the earth and heavens, and is the guide and helper and savior of his creatures. This larger and higher idea of the divine being long kept many elements and still keeps some elements of the old crudity. The Jews, who brought it forward most prominently and from whom it overspread a great part of the world, could believe in, could believe in a God of righteousness who was exclusive, arbitrary, wrathful, jealous, often cruel, and even wantonly sanguinary. Even now, it is possible for some to believe in a creator who has made heaven and hell, an eternal hell, the two poles of his creation, and has even, according to some religions, predestined the souls he has created not only to sin and punishment, but to an eternal damnation. But even apart from these extravagances of a childish religious belief, the idea of Almighty Judge, Legislator, King is a crude and imperfect idea of the divine when taken by itself, because it takes an inferior and an external truth for the main truth, and it tends to prevent a higher approach to a more intimate reality. It exaggerates the importance of the sense of sin and thereby prolongs and increases the soul's fear and self distrust and weakness. It attaches the pursuit of virtue and the shunning of sin to the idea of rewards and punishment, though given, though given in an afterlife, and makes them dependent on the lower motives of fear and interest instead of the higher spirit which should govern the ethical being. It makes hell and heaven, and not the divine himself, the object of the human soul in its religious living. These crudities have served their turn in the slow education of the human mind, but they are of no utility to the yogin who knows that whatever truth they may represent belongs rather to the external relations of the developing human soul with the external law of the universe than any intimate truth of the inner relations of the human soul with the divine. But it is these which are the proper field of yoga.
Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do, we must remember the chapter heading. Okay. The Godward emotions. And we can start from the Gita's description of the four types who have Godward emotions. First is the Artha, the one who is suffering. Okay. Normally, the one who is suffering, if you are suffering physically, you go to a doctor. If you are suffering in the vital, you go to a friend or a relative. But if you are suffering internally, you go to a God. So the Godward emotions
I can't hear Rangada. How about you, Arjanadi?
No, no, we
I
can't
can't
hear.
hear him.
Oh,
And for this thing has also
Yeah,
gone.
please phone him. Please phone
Uh,
him.
I'm doing that. I'm doing that, Hassan. His computer is giving problems as yesterday. He will just join on the phone. He told us to wait.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. That's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Rangadhar.
Yes,
And-
we can hear you.
So we continue. Okay. So the Godward emotions. So first is the one who is suffering and appeals to God. The second is the one who is wanting success in the world or money, and he artharthi. And the third one is the one who wants to know, jijjasu, the one who is wanting to know God. And the last is the one who is the jnani. He is approaching the divine in the right way. So this is what Srimli is discussing, and we will go para by para and we see all the implications of what he's saying. Okay? So first approaches are all based on wrong ideas of God, that he can be bribed, that he is a king who can get angry, he is a judge, and he is disposing rewards to good people and punishments to bad people. These are all very crude beginnings, okay, so of devotion. They are valid for a certain level, which Srirendra will tell us, and how they are valid also, we will see afterwards, okay, as soon as we come. So I am reading the first sentence. A nearer approach to the beginnings of the way of devotion becomes possible when this element of divine power disengages itself from these crudities and fixes on the idea of a divine ruler, creator of the world and master of the law, who governs the earth and heaven and is the guide and helper and savior of creatures. If you limit yourself only to, he is like a divine ruler and creator and master of the law. It is a law and he is master of the law. Then you are in trouble. Okay, you have got wrong ideas. But as soon as you come to the idea that he is a guide, he is a helper, he is a savior of creatures, then you are coming nearer to the right idea of devotion. That's what Srimli is saying. A nearer approach to the beginnings of the way of devotion. The wrong ideas are you are a little far away from the real devotion. But as soon as you think of him as a guide and helper and savior, then you are much nearer to the right idea of devotion. This larger and higher idea of the divine being, long kept many elements and still keeps some elements of the old crudity. Okay, so the old crudity now is going to tell you what they are. The Jews brought it forward most prominently. Okay, because you have the idea of Jehovah, and he will punish you for wrong things and he will reward you for good things. Okay. That was the main. Moses, you remember the 10 commandments. Moses gave the 10 commandments, and if you infringe on those laws, you will be punished. It has a certain purpose for those who are very, very crude, because fear of God will make you desist from certain things. So there's an element of truth, however distorted it is. Fear of God has a certain purpose for very undeveloped souls. Okay, so that's what he's saying. The Jews who brought it forward most prominently, and from whom it overspread a great part of the world, could believe in a God of righteousness. Righteous. Okay? Righteous means you must always do the right and never the wrong. Righteousness is a sort of moral conduct. Okay? Who was exclusive. He is the only one. Arbitrary. He can do whatever he wants. Wrathful. He can get angry. Jealous. Okay. If you succeed too much, he's jealous of you. Okay. Often cruel and wantonly sanguinary. Wantonly means without any reason, huh? without any reason for it. Okay, irrationally. Sanguinary, bloody. He can even kill you, and he can even punish you. You can even bleed from his punishments. Even now, it is possible for some to believe in a creator who has made heaven and hell. It's very, very common. The idea of heaven and hell in all religions, it is there. Heaven and hell, an eternal hell, okay? And the two poles of his creation. So, most religions have this idea of heaven and hell. And eternal, that's even worse. Okay, eternal hell, the two poles of his creation, and has even, according to some religious, predestined souls. And according to some means, he's referring to the Christian religion, okay? Because he is creating the divine is creating the souls and putting them into the earth. But when he has created, he is responsible for their good actions and bad actions. So that's what is meant by predestined souls. He has, according to some religions, predestined souls he has created, not only to sin and punishment, but to an eternal damnation. So when the divine has created you, and he is saying you are responsible now for your actions, how can that be? That's irrational. Okay, so it's one of the irrationalities of the in Christianity. But in the Indian system, the Vedantic solution, you are yourself the maker of your own. Okay, you yourself are the maker of your own destiny. That's completely different. If you are doing something wrong, there's nothing wrong or right, but if you are doing something, it will have an effect. The law of karma is a very important idea because it completely challenges this idea of predestined souls being punished for good that they have been programmed to do. Okay, good or bad, the divine has created you, and he has put these ideas of good and bad into you. So that's the irrationality. Okay, but to an eternal damnation, which is even worse, you will burn in hell forever. But these are all the crude ideas. But even the idea of in the Quran, okay, it is there that those who are non-believers should be killed. They don't have any right to exist. It is there very much, okay? So this is, and they believe in it. That's why they Sartan Juda Karo, that is the cry in India today, okay? Sartan, behead the man, okay? It happened in France also, na? In 2 cases, 3 cases. So all these are crude ideas. Now, but even apart from these extravagances, all these ideas, wrong ideas, of a childish religious belief, the idea of an almighty judge, legislator, king, is a crude and imperfect idea of the divine when taken by itself. Now, this is interesting what he's saying. It is true that the divine is a judge, he is a legislator, he is a king. It is true. But only if you think that he is that, then he is a mistake. It's crude, because he is not only a king and legislator, but he's also a guide, he's also a friend, he's also the savior. So if you remove these 3 things, guide, savior, friend, then it becomes again a crude thing. Because it takes an inferior and external truth for the main truth. And it tends to prevent a higher approach to a more intimate reality. Note the word intimate. Okay? If he is a friend, you can have intimacy with him. If he is a savior, he is intimate with you. Okay? He is father, mother. Only if you take him as a king and a judge, there is a truth to that. Because he is, after all, a king and he is a legislator. He is making the laws. In the physical world, he is making the laws. But he's not only that. That's the question. So when you take it only by these ideas, then it is wrong. You must also think that he is a savior, friend, and friend, savior, and he's kind. He's kind towards you. He's a savior. Tends to prevent a higher approach to a more intimate reality. It exaggerates the importance of the sense of sin. This is a problem. In most of these, the human soul begins as a sinner. You are a born sinner, and you have to learn how not to sin. Whereas in the Indian idea, it's the opposite. You are not a sinner. You are actually the divine, essential. But there are quotes. He has quoted himself with 3-4 heavy quotes, which are darkness and which are crude. And you have to get rid of those things. So you have to learn, but you are not a sinner to begin with, not at all. Therefore, thereby, it prolongs and increases the soul's fear and self-distrust and weakness. Diffidence also comes in. I'm so imperfect. How can I do that? Okay. Can I reach the divine? Self-distrust comes in. Lack of confidence and weakness. The idea of it attaches the pursuit of virtue and the shunning of sin to the idea of rewards and punishment. Okay? Though given in an afterlife, and makes them dependent on the lower motives of fear and interest instead of the higher spirit which should govern the ethical being. So, very clear what he's saying? It attaches the pursuit of virtue and the shunning of sin to the idea of rewards and punishment. You should do virtue because then you will be rewarded. And you should avoid sin because you can avoid punishment therefore. This is not the way. This is the real will. You have to do everything in the right way because that's the right thing to do, not because of reward and punishment. And instead of the higher spirit, we should govern the ethical being. Ethical being, that part of you which is the ethical being is the moral being, the mind. Okay, it's the mind that becomes ethical. It makes hell and heaven and not the divine himself the object of the human soul in its religious living. It happens everywhere, all over the world. Okay, in India, it's very, very common. God-fearing man is very much respected, so he will not do any wrong. But from the motives are all wrong. The motive of I want to avoid sin because then I will avoid punishment. These crudities have served their turn in the slow education of the human mind. Now that's an interesting point. Even fear of God, even the one who is punishing you, there is a certain validity in the idea. It's not a valid idea, but it helps you to avoid sin. And if it helps you to avoid limitation and sin, it is good. So for those who are very, very beginners in the spiritual life or even the moral life, it has its value. That's what Sam is saying. And it's a slow education. Okay? Slowly you realize that God is not only a judge and a legislator and a king sitting on you with for punishment and reward, but he's also a friend, a guide, and a savior. But they are of no utility to the yogin. Now, the yogin has a right idea of how to approach God, who knows that whatever truth they may represent belongs rather to the external relations of the developing human soul with the external law of the universe than any intimate truth of the inner relations of the human soul with the divine. But it is these which are the proper field of yoga. Now, he's saying something interesting, and let's have a look at that. He's saying, these crudities have served their turn in the slow education of the human mind. So very clear, if you fear somebody, if you fear your patients, your parents, then you won't do something wrong because my parents will scold me. Exactly in the same way, if you do something wrong, God will punish me. So you avoid. So it has a certain value. It is pushing you towards the right and pushing you away from the wrong. So it has a certain value, but very, very slow and in the beginning. But they are of no utility to the yogin who knows that whatever truth they may represent belongs rather to the external relations of the developing human soul with the external law of the universe. The external law of the universe is when you make a mistake, you have to pay for the mistake. A very clear example of that is if a child, ignorance is there, na? And if a child puts his hand in fire, his hand gets burnt and he suffers. But is it a punishment? It's not a punishment. It's a law of ignorance. Okay? That is the thing. But he has learned. So this idea of punishment becomes a process of learning. Okay? Suffering is given to because there's an external law. Okay? It's a physical law in the universe that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you do good, then naturally, if you are doing good, you won't suffer. Okay? So that is not the real reason. There are other laws also which are psychological and deeper. But the external law, yes. If you do something wrong, you are punished. Okay? You are punished in this sense, punishment with double quotes. Okay? So it's not really a punishment from God, but it is that you have to learn that the law of karma is not a question of punishment and rewards at all. Okay? In Essays, Human and Divine, or is it Essays and Philosophy, Sri Aurobindo has got about 150 pages where he discusses the law of karma. The law of karma, as understood by everybody, is absolutely wrong. It's not punishment and rewards. It is the process of learning the right thing and going up. Okay, so that's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. But it is these which are the proper field of yoga. So the internal, he knows the intimate truth of the inner relations, not the outer relation, but the inner relations of the human soul with the divine. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Now, just to summarize the whole thing, it is evident that these crudities distort and pervert the approach to God, who is eternally all kindness, all compassion, all love. Okay, so this is what Sri is saying. It is evident that these crudities distort and pervert the approach to God, who is eternally all kindness, all compassion, all love. That is why the moment we remove the element of power to punish and reward, we have a far better beginning for the yoga of devotion. Even by maintaining the idea of God as a ruler and king, the better approach becomes possible when the concept of God as king and ruler is also modified as God the creator of the universe, God the master of the law, not subject to it, God the guide, helper, savior of creatures. If these are introduced, then it becomes a much better approach towards God in the right way. The devotion becomes right. But even this larger and higher concept did keep many of the earlier crudities. The Jews used it and introduced it widely to the Western world. This concept was of God seen as righteous, but also arbitrary, whimsical, wrathful, jealous, cruel, even permitting bloody deeds. Even the bloody deed is very interesting. Perseus the deliverer, if you remember, Andromeda is being sacrificed to Poseidon. So that's what is meant by bloody deed, sanguinary. The idea of even in India, the idea of human sacrifice was there. Okay. But that's a symbolic and different meanings are there. Sunashepa, okay, he was one. But that's a symbolic meaning. We'll come to that later on. Even in modern times, there are people who believe that God created heaven and hell. He created souls whose behavior was that God ordained, but that which God ordained, and they were consigned to hell or heaven according to their deeds, for which they were not responsible because their actions had been predestined at birth. The idea of God as judge, king, legislator are crude and childish and take the most external aspects of creation as valid and true and draw exaggerated conclusions far from the truth. Sin is given excessive importance. Virtue yields rewards. Sin entails punishment and leads to hell. So much so that morality, heaven and hell become of primary importance and God is relegated to the background. These crude ideas have been steps in the religious education of mankind, but have no place for the yogin who knows the truth, that these crude, primitive ideas are the most superficial appearances, and have no essential truth to them. It is the truth of the inmost relations of soul with the divine that are the relevant concepts for the yoga of devotion. They got said in the past. Okay. Now it is 8:30. We've got 8 minutes or so. We can read one more para. Still out of this conception. So one of you can read, whoever has the text. Archanati doesn't have the text, so she
Can
can't
I
read.
read?
Yes, yes,
Can
you
I
can.
read?
Yes, please do. Still out of this conception.
Still out of this conception, there arises certain developments which bring us nearer to the threshold of the yoga of devotion. First, there can emerge the idea of the divine as the source and law and aim of our ethical being, and from this there can come the knowledge of the highest self to which our nature aspires. The will to which we have to assimilate our will, the eternal right and purity and truth and wisdom into harmony with which our nature has to grow and towards whose being we are attracted. By the way, we arrive at the yoga of works, and this yoga has a place for personal devotion to the divine. The divine will serves as the master of our works, to whose voice we must listen, whose divine impulsion we must obey, and whose work it is the sole business of our active life and will to do. Secondly, there emerges the idea of the divine spirit, the father of all, who extends his wings of benignant protection and love all his creatures, and from that grows between the soul and the divine the relation father and child, a relation of love, and as a result the relation of brotherhood with our fellow beings. These relations of the divine into the calm pure light of whose nature we have to grow, and the master whom we approach through works and service, the Father who responds to the love of the soul that approaches him as the child, are admitted elements of the yoga of devotion.
There you are. So, this is the. We can do one thing. I'll just read out the summary. We've got 5 minutes. So now, in this para, he's saying, even from these twisted conceptions, certain truths can be uncovered, shorn of their false accretions, which take man nearer to the real yoga of devotion. First, there arises the idea of a divine as the source, the origin, the law, the aim of our moral being. From this emerges the idea of the knowledge of God as the supreme being to which we aspire. There emerges his will to which our personal will must conform. There emerges his purity, truth, wisdom, right, into which our nature must grow. This leads to Karma Yoga, which has a place in Bhakti Yoga. This is because God's will is the master of our human works and we have to obey him. The aim of our life is nothing but to do his works in the world. Secondly, another idea of God emerges from these primary primitive conceptions. This first, the divine spirit, is the father of all creatures. This idea leads to the relation of father and child in which love predominates. It is his love, his benignant protection that all men seek. These 3 points are certainly part of the yoga of devotion. And what are those points? Number 1, man has to grow into God's calm, pure light. Number 2, man, through his works and service, has to approach him. Number 3, God the Father responds to the love of the human soul. These are the 3 points which emerge out of this, the wrong ideas and go to the right ideas. That's what he's saying. Okay? So, even the
Can
wrong
I ask a question, please?
Go ahead.
You know, once there was a man who was very nice, kind, etc. And suddenly he was accused of a murder. And he had not done murder. So people go to mother and say to mother, you know, the person he had not murdered the other one. So mother said yes, but in his last life he had murdered and he with it. So in this life he has to pay for it. So then what is karma? Law of karma.
Yeah. The law of karma works in a very interesting way. Okay. It is not a punishment. The law of karma is not a punishment and reward. It's a result of your own actions. Okay. As I said, if you put your hand into fire ignorantly, because you are ignorant, you don't know. So you have to learn how to know. Knowledge arises from the right way. Okay. If you are going on the path and you are going on the right way, there is no problem. But if you go either this way or that way, you have to be corrected. So the suffering is a way of correction and getting you onto the right path. It has to be seen in that way. It should not be. So now he is suffering the effects of his murder, which is committed in his last life. That means the law of karma is attaches to the soul when it is identified with the body mind life. But the moment the soul is not identified with body mind life, it is free. The law of karma does not apply to it. But the law of the karma will take place for the body mind life because there is a rigidity and a law. Okay? But you will not be affected by it. Your consciousness will not be affected by it. We have discussed this many times now. Even the avatar, it was his past life where he was learning and he must have made mistakes. So there also there's an effect of his wrong actions in the past.
So you.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, you're saying.
Then how will this man know that it is because of my past life that I have to pay this life and I have to learn that I should not murder?
No, you
This
cannot.
life was innocent.
I understand your question, but you don't know. A time comes when this automatically you come to know that you should not do any wrong because you suffer yourself. Maybe not from past life, but in this life, if you, again, we come back to the same example. Okay. Out of ignorance, I put my hand in fire and it gets burnt. Now I know I have learned that I should not put my hand in fire. Exactly in the same way, you see that there are consequences. And then when the sufficient development is there in the soul, you realize that your actions when wrong are going to give you misery. So you learn. It's a process of learning. Your question is about the past life and you don't know, but in that case, you will not benefit fully. You will benefit only when you know that your wrong action, each action has given you the right. It's very simple. We don't need to go to the idea of punishment and reward. Even when a nation is sending its rockets into space, it ends in failure because they made a mistake. Yeah? Then you learn from the mistake and you correct the mistake and then you go and then you have success. It's a process of learning. Mistakes, or rather, if you want to call them sins, okay? Sin is nothing but a mistake. So if you attach the idea of sin because there is the idea of a moral idea, but it's not a moral idea at all. It's just a mistake has got its own effects. Just like the example of the small child putting his hand in fire, number one. And the second one is even better, okay? When you are making a mistake, okay? The best example is again that Thomas Alva Edison. 250 times he failed in making the electric bulb. Finally, he got it right. So every time he's failing, he knows that this is not the right way. Finally, so it's a learning process. That is the law of karma. The law of karma should not be seen as suffering and rewards and punishment. No, that's what you have to not see it in that way. You have to change your angle of vision to understand the law of karma. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
It's not easy to understand because I told you 150 pages he has written. So very carefully one has to read and understand. But basically it is this. The law of karma is not a question of rewards and punishment. It's a question of learning. You learn from your mistakes. That's why it is there. If the law of karma is not there, you will not learn. Okay? You will go on committing the same mistake again and again. Okay, we stop here today.
Thank you, Rangada.
Au revoir, everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Rangada.